The pilot suffered a massive heart attack at 31,000 feet. The plane started dropping. And the woman serving coffee in the back, the one nobody was looking at, rushed straight to the cockpit and took control of the aircraft. All 178 passengers had no idea. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Sunday, March 22, 2020. 3:42 p.m. 31,000 feet above eastern Arizona. The coffee Rebecca Mason was serving to the businessman in seat 14B was still steaming when she heard it, not a sound that most passengers would ever recognize, not a PA announcement, not an alarm bell, not anything that would make a single one of the 178 people on board look up from their movies or their magazines or their conversations, but the subtle, unmistakable change in engine pitch that came from someone in the cockpit reducing thrust, not because of any routine procedure, not because a checklist required it, but because the hands that had been holding the controls were no longer capable of holding them, and in the 3 seconds it took Rebecca to set down the coffee pot, grab the galley counter for balance as the aircraft's nose dipped 2 degrees, and start moving toward the front of the cabin with the kind of deliberate speed that looked perfectly calm to every passenger she passed but was covering ground as fast as she could move without running. 178 people continued watching movies and reading magazines and eating snacks and living in the complete, peaceful ignorance of people who have no idea that the man responsible for their lives has just suffered a massive heart attack at 31,000 feet, and the 26-year-old first officer now alone in the cockpit was about to discover that flying a commercial aircraft completely alone was not something covered in the 4 months of training she had completed before this, her 7th commercial flight. Rebecca reached the cockpit door in 11 seconds. She knocked twice. Calm. Professional. Not panicked. The door opened. First Officer Emily Hart stood in the doorway. 26 years old. Face completely white. Hands shaking so hard that Rebecca could see it from 3 feet away. And before Emily could say a single word, before she could explain or ask or cry or do any of the things her body was trying to do all at once, Rebecca said 5 words that made Emily's brain stop working entirely. "I'm a pilot. Let me in." Because the woman standing in that doorway, wearing a navy blue flight attendant uniform with a fresh coffee stain on the left sleeve, the woman who had spent the last 90 minutes walking up and down the aisle with a smile on her face, handing out drinks and collecting cups and asking passengers if they needed anything else, had just claimed to be a pilot. And when Emily's mouth opened to say something logical, something that made sense, Rebecca looked past her at the instrument panel, read the entire situation in 2 seconds flat, and spoke with the calm, precise authority of someone who had done this exact kind of thing many times before. "Captain has had a cardiac event. You are hand flying. Autopilot is off. Your heading is drifting right. Your altitude is dropping. You have about 90 seconds before the passengers notice the descent. I am rated on the 737 with 1,847 flight hours. So unless you want to land this aircraft completely by yourself, I suggest you let me sit down right now." Emily stepped aside. And over the next 43 minutes, while passengers watched movies and talked and had no idea that anything was wrong, while air traffic controllers cleared the sky and emergency vehicles lined up along a runway in Flagstaff, Arizona, while a cardiologist in seat 24A put down his crossword puzzle and a 26-year-old first officer found something inside herself she didn't know was there, a flight attendant named Rebecca Mason sat in the cockpit jump seat and helped fly a Boeing 737. With a dying captain beside them and 178 lives depending on everything that happened next. She was not hiding her skills. She had simply been waiting for the moment when someone needed them badly enough to look past the uniform. That moment had arrived. Southwest Flight 1455 had departed Phoenix Sky Harbor at 1:47 p.m. Pacific Time. Non-stop to Seattle-Tacoma International. A Boeing 737-800. A Sunday afternoon flight filled with the kind of people Sunday afternoon flights are always filled with, families heading home after weekend visits, business travelers with laptops open on their tray tables, college students returning to Washington schools after spring break, a retired couple in matching jackets sharing a bag of pretzels. Everything was routine. The beverage service was done. The snack carts were put away. The cabin had that settled, sleepy mid-flight quality, that particular peace that comes about 90 minutes into a flight when everyone has found their position and stopped needing things. 2 more hours to Seattle. Nothing to do but wait. In the aft galley, Rebecca Mason was organizing the snack service. Loading boxes onto her cart. Peanuts. Pretzels. The usual. She was 29 years old. 5 feet 6 inches tall. Athletic in the way that came from years of real physical activity. Black woman with natural hair in a neat low bun, as Southwest grooming standards required. Minimal makeup. Sensible black shoes designed for walking miles of aircraft aisle without her feet giving out. She had been a Southwest flight attendant for 3 years. She was good at her job. She looked exactly like what she appeared to be. The coffee stain on her left sleeve had come from turbulence 15 minutes earlier. She had been annoyed about it. Now she had completely forgotten it existed. Nobody on that aircraft would have guessed what she had been before the uniform. Nobody would have guessed what she still was, underneath it. Rebecca Mason had wanted to fly since she was 8 years old. She grew up in Tucson, Arizona, close enough to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base that she could lie in her backyard and watch jets cut across the desert sky. She did not watch them the way other children watched planes, with passing, distracted curiosity. She watched them the way some people watch the ocean. As if the thing she was looking at already belonged to her in some way she could not yet explain. She joined Air Force ROTC in high school. She paid for her private pilot license at 17 by working 3 part-time jobs at the same time, a grocery store, a fast food restaurant, a weekend shift pumping gas. She was a teenager waking up at 5 in the morning to get to the airfield early because the early morning flight rates were cheaper, and because the air over Tucson in the early morning was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen in her life, and she was going to be up in it no matter what it cost. She went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Prescott, Arizona. One of the best aviation schools in the entire country. She worked her way through it the same way she worked her way through everything, with complete focus, with the kind of quiet, relentless determination that does not ask for attention or recognition, that simply shows up every single day and does exactly what needs to be done. She got her commercial pilot certificate at 21. Her flight instructor certificate at 22. She started building hours as a flight instructor at a small regional airport, teaching students to fly, taking up nervous beginners and frightened teenagers and middle-aged men who had always dreamed of being pilots and had finally decided to try. She was genuinely gifted at it. Patient in the specific way that good instructors are patient. Calm in a crisis. Clear under pressure. She could talk a student down from a panic at 8,000 feet with the same quiet certainty that made you feel, listening to her, that the situation was already handled, that the only thing left was the simple mechanical work of getting the aircraft back on the ground. She built up 1,847 flight hours by the time she was 23 years old. She applied to every regional airline she could find. She got interviews at 3 of them. She was rejected by all 3. Not enough multi-engine time, they said. Not enough turbine experience. We are looking for candidates with different backgrounds. Different backgrounds. She turned those words over in her mind for a long time afterward. She kept applying. She kept instructing. 2 more years passed. The student loan debt from Embry-Riddle was $147,000. Flight instructing paid $18 an hour. She was doing the math every month and the math was never getting any better. At 25 years old, she made a decision that felt like giving something up and getting something necessary at the same time. She applied to Southwest Airlines as a flight attendant. Starting pay, $25 an hour, plus benefits, plus the ability to fly for free on her days off. It was better than instructing. Not by much. But it was enough to keep her head above water. Enough to make the loan payments. Enough to stop lying awake at 3 in the morning running numbers that never came out right. They hired her immediately. Of course they did. She was trained as a flight attendant. She started flying. For 4 years, she had been walking the aisles of Boeing 737s that she was fully qualified to fly from the cockpit, serving drinks and collecting cups and asking passengers if they needed anything else. She had kept her pilot certificates current. On her days off, she rented Cessnas at local airports. She stayed sharp. She stayed ready. She was the kind of pilot who could land a broken Cessna on a dark highway at night and walk away without a scratch. The kind of pilot who could talk a student down from a full panic attack at 8,000 feet, keeping her own voice so calm and steady that the student's breathing slowed just from hearing it. The kind of pilot who could fly on instruments so smoothly that passengers would have sworn the autopilot was engaged, except the autopilot was off and it was just her hands on the controls and her eyes on the gauges and 8 years of knowing exactly what every number on every dial was telling her. She could read weather. She could read engines. She could feel when something was wrong before any instrument confirmed it, the way a musician hears a note go slightly flat before anyone else in the room notices. Nobody on Flight 1455 knew any of that. Nobody who sat down in a seat she walked past had any idea that the woman collecting their empty cups had more real flying ability than most people who spent their entire careers in cockpits. Ready for what, she had not known. Until today. At 3:42 p.m., somewhere over the eastern Arizona desert, the engine pitch changed. Rebecca was in the aft galley. Loading her snack cart. Thinking about next month's bills. Rent due. Student loan payment. Car insurance. Then she heard it. The pitch dropped. Maybe 0.5%. Less. The kind of reduction that would be completely invisible to every single passenger on that aircraft, invisible to most flight attendants, invisible to anyone who did not have 1,847 hours of flight time stored in their body like a language they had learned early enough that it lived in their muscles and not just their mind. Rebecca stopped loading the cart. She listened. The nose dipped. 2 degrees. Maybe slightly more. The aircraft was descending. Slowly. Not dramatically. But descending when it should have been level, when there had been no announcement, no reason, no procedure that called for it. Pilots did not reduce thrust and begin descending mid-cruise without telling anyone. Unless something had gone very wrong. She left the cart where it was. She walked forward. Fast enough to mean something. Slow enough that no passenger would look up and wonder what was happening. The face she showed the cabin was the same face she always showed the cabin, calm, professional, going about her work. Inside, her pilot brain had already taken over completely. She reached the forward galley. Jennifer was there, her colleague, 42 years old, 10 years with Southwest, steady and experienced and right now completely unaware that anything unusual had happened. "Did you feel that?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Feel what?" "The descent. The thrust reduction." Jennifer looked confused. "I didn't notice anything." "Call the cockpit. Something is wrong." Jennifer picked up the interphone. Dialed the cockpit. No answer. She dialed again. Nothing. The color left Jennifer's face in a slow, awful way, like watching a light being turned off from somewhere far away. "They're not answering," she said. Rebecca was already moving toward the cockpit door. "I'm going in." "Rebecca, you can't just. Something is wrong." She said it simply. As a fact that did not need an argument around it. "I'm checking." She knocked twice on the cockpit door. Waited 3 seconds. The door opened. Emily Hart was 26 years old. Blonde hair in a regulation bun. 4 months of commercial flying experience. 7 flights as a certified first officer. Right now she looked like someone who had been handed something extremely heavy and extremely fragile at the same time and had no idea how to hold it. Her face was completely white. Her eyes were wide. Her hands were shaking visibly, not trembling, not a small nervous tremor, but shaking the way hands shake when your whole nervous system has understood that you are in a situation that your training covered in theory but nothing in your actual lived experience has prepared you for. Behind her, in the left seat, Captain Jack Brennan was slumped sideways. His head had fallen to one side. His hands had fallen away from the controls. His chest was moving, he was breathing, but he was deeply unconscious and he was not going to wake up on his own. Emily's words came out in pieces. He grabbed his chest and, I don't know what to do, I've never flown alone, I can't. Rebecca said 5 words. I'm a pilot. Let me in. Emily stared at her. You're a flight attendant. I'm a pilot who works as a flight attendant. I have 1,847 hours. I am rated on the 737. I can help you. Let me in. Right now. Emily's brain was trying to process this and failing. The person in front of her was wearing a navy blue flight attendant vest with a coffee stain on the sleeve. She had been serving drinks an hour ago. She could not be a pilot. That was not how this worked. That was not how any of this worked. Rebecca looked past her at the instrument panel. Autopilot, off. Aircraft hand flying. Heading drifting to the right. Altitude decreasing. Not fast. But steadily. The kind of descent that would stay invisible to the passengers for about another minute and then become very visible and very frightening very quickly. Emily. She used her name deliberately. Firmly. The way you use someone's name when you need their brain to stop spinning and find something solid to hold on to. Listen to me. The captain has had a cardiac event. Autopilot is off. You are hand flying. Your heading is drifting. You are descending. In about 90 seconds, passengers are going to feel this descent and it is going to cause panic. I am rated on this aircraft. I can help you. But you need to let me in right now. 1 second of silence. 1 second in which Emily Hart made the fastest and most important decision of her entire life. She stepped aside. Rebecca entered the cockpit. She did not wait for further permission. She pulled down the jump seat, the additional cockpit seat positioned exactly for situations like this one, and sat down. Her eyes went immediately to the instrument panel the way eyes trained for 8 years go to instrument panels, quickly and completely, reading everything at once like a page of text in a language you have spoken your whole life. She reached over and checked Captain Brennan's pulse. Weak. Irregular. The rhythm of a heart in serious, active trouble. Heart attack. Massive. He needed a hospital right now. She turned to Emily. Engage autopilot. Right now. Level us off. Emily's hands moved to the autopilot controls. She fumbled. Her fingers found the button and pressed it. The aircraft stabilized. The descent stopped. The nose came back to level. Rebecca exhaled. 1 breath. That was everything she allowed herself. Good. He is alive. He needs to get to a hospital, which means we need to get on the ground. Now I am going to contact air traffic control. She keyed the radio. Her voice was the same voice she used when she explained an instrument approach to a frightened student, completely steady, completely calm, the voice that said we have done this before, we know exactly what to do, here is the next step and we are going to take it. Albuquerque Center, this is Southwest 1455. We have an in-flight medical emergency. Our captain is incapacitated. We are requesting immediate priority landing at the nearest suitable airport. The controller came back in less than 3 seconds. Southwest 1455, Albuquerque Center, roger your emergency. What is the nature of the captain's incapacitation? Suspected cardiac event. Captain is unconscious and unresponsive. First officer is flying the aircraft. We need an immediate diversion. Copy, Southwest 1455. Nearest suitable airport is Flagstaff Pulliam. 63 miles northeast of your position. Runway 21, 7,000 feet of runway, ILS approach available. We are clearing all traffic now. You are priority. Emergency services will be standing by. Rebecca looked at Emily. Can you fly an ILS approach? Emily nodded. Her hands were still shaking, but she nodded with something real behind it, not confidence yet, but the memory of competence. The knowledge that somewhere inside the fear there was training, and the training had an answer for this. I have done them. In training. But I have never, not alone, not with. You are not alone, Rebecca said. Simply. As a fact. I am here. We are doing this together. Emily looked at her. Really looked at her, properly, for the first time since she had opened the cockpit door. You are really a pilot? 8 years. 5 of them as a flight instructor. I logged time on 737s during type rating training. I know this aircraft. I know emergency procedures. I know ILS approaches in bad weather and good weather and at night and when I was so tired I could barely see straight. Rebecca paused. I know what it feels like to be exactly where you are right now. Scared. Alone. Not sure you can do it. Another pause. You can do it. But I need you to trust me. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then, quietly, why are you working as a flight attendant if you are a pilot? It had a long answer. It had an answer that took years to tell properly, $147,000 of student loan debt, 3 rejection letters from 3 regional airlines, $18 an hour for flight instructing in math that never came out right, and eventually a decision that felt like defeat but kept her alive financially and kept her in the air at least part of the time, which was better than the alternative. But they were 63 miles from Flagstaff. A man was dying in the seat beside them. And 178 people were back in the cabin reading magazines. Because airlines did not hire me, Rebecca said. And student loans do not pay themselves. But that does not matter right now. She turned back to the instruments. What matters right now is getting 178 people on the ground safely. Are you ready? Emily straightened in her seat. Yes, she said. Rebecca called the cabin on the interphone. Jennifer answered immediately. Is the captain okay? Jennifer's voice was controlled. Just barely. He is alive. We are diverting to Flagstaff. I need you to prepare the cabin for an early landing. Do not tell passengers it is an emergency. Tell them we are making an unplanned stop. Keep it calm and keep it moving. Can you do that? Yes. One more thing. See if there is a doctor on board. There was. A cardiologist from Phoenix, returning home from a conference, had been in seat 24A halfway through a crossword puzzle when Jennifer appeared at his elbow and said something quietly that made him immediately set his pen down and follow her forward without asking a single question. He came to the cockpit. He could not do much. This was not a hospital, this was the front of a passenger aircraft at 30,000 feet, but he could monitor Captain Brennan. He could tell Rebecca that the captain was still alive, that his pulse was weak but present, that they needed to get him on the ground within the next 30 to 40 minutes. 30 to 40 minutes. 63 miles. They could do that. What happened over the next 43 minutes was not dramatic in the way that movies are dramatic. There was no single moment where everything turned on a knife's edge. There was no one heroic action that saved the day all at once. It was professional. It was careful. It was the specific, methodical, unglamorous work of 2 pilots doing exactly what they were trained to do under conditions that neither of them had asked for and neither of them could have fully prepared for. Rebecca worked the radio while Emily flew. She communicated with Albuquerque Center and then with Flagstaff Approach Control, relaying their situation, getting updated weather conditions, confirming runway information, coordinating the approach. Her voice never changed. Every transmission was clean and clear and precise. Every controller who spoke to her got the information they needed in the order they needed it. She walked Emily through the approach checklist. Not by doing it for her, by doing it with her. There was a difference, and it mattered enormously, not just for protocol reasons but because Emily needed to know that she was the pilot. That her hands were on the controls. That she was capable of this specific thing that was being asked of her right now. Flaps to 15, Rebecca said. Emily moved the flap lever. Airspeed check, 185 knots, exactly where we want it. You will intercept the glide slope in about 90 seconds. When you do, let the aircraft settle onto it naturally. Do not chase it. Landing gear when you are established on final approach. Emily nodded at each instruction. Her hands had not stopped shaking entirely, there was still a tremor in them, still the physical evidence of everything her nervous system was carrying, but the shaking had become background noise. It had become something she was working through rather than something that was working through her. She was flying. She was actually, genuinely flying. 50 miles from Flagstaff. 40. 30. Back in the cabin, 178 people had been told there was an unplanned stop in Flagstaff. Most of them were mildly annoyed. Some were confused. A few were asking Jennifer questions she was answering with a calm and patience that cost her something real to maintain. None of them knew. None of them had any idea that 3 feet away, behind a locked door, 2 women, one who had been flying commercially for 4 months and one who had been flying anything she could get her hands on for 8 years, were bringing this aircraft down together. None of them knew that the flight attendant who had handed them their drinks an hour ago was sitting in the cockpit jump seat talking a young pilot through the worst moment of her professional life. None of them knew how close it had been. None of them would ever fully know. Flagstaff Pulliam Airport was ready for them. Every available emergency vehicle was staged at the edge of runway 21. Fire trucks. Ambulances. The airport's full emergency response team, in their positions, waiting. The airspace around Flagstaff had been completely cleared. Every other aircraft rerouted. The frequency was clean. The runway was open and waiting, and it belonged entirely to Southwest 1455. Southwest 1455, Flagstaff approach. You are cleared for ILS runway 21. Wind 250 at 8 knots. Altimeter 30.15. Emergency services are standing by. You are cleared to land. Copy, Rebecca said into the radio. Southwest 1455, ILS runway 21, cleared to land. She looked at Emily. Final approach. You have the aircraft. You are doing great. Emily's eyes were on the instruments. Airspeed 145 knots. Glide slope centered. Localizer centered. Descent rate steady and correct. Everything exactly where it needed to be. Her voice was quiet. What if I mess this up? You won't. How do you know that? Because you have been doing everything right for the past 41 minutes. Because you are trained for exactly this. Because you have 7,000 feet of runway waiting for you. Rebecca's voice was quiet and completely certain. And because I am here. And we are landing this aircraft together. A pause. The runway was appearing through the windscreen ahead of them. Gray concrete and desert and mountains and the long line of emergency vehicles along the edge of the tarmac and the afternoon Arizona sun on everything. I have only ever done this with a captain beside me, Emily said. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Now you have something different, she said. You have someone who remembers being new. Who remembers being scared in a cockpit and not knowing if she could do it. Who remembers that scared does not mean incapable. She paused. And who knows, because she is sitting right here watching you, that you can do this. Emily's hands tightened on the yoke. She flew the approach. At 500 feet she was stable and on speed. At 200 feet she was exactly where she needed to be. At 50 feet she brought the throttles back and held the nose level and then gently, carefully, brought it up just slightly. The main gear touched the runway. Then the nose wheel. A firm landing. Harder than ideal. Nothing like the smooth Sunday afternoon arrival that Flight 1455 had been scheduled to make at Seattle-Tacoma in 2 hours. But the aircraft was down. The thrust reversers deployed. The brakes engaged. The aircraft rolled out on runway 21 and slowed and stopped. Southwest Flight 1455. All 178 passengers. On the ground. Safe. Emily Hart pressed her forehead against the back of her hand on the yoke and took a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her lungs had ever gone before. Rebecca reached over and put her hand on Emily's shoulder, briefly. She did not say anything. There was nothing left to say. Captain Jack Brennan was off the aircraft and in an ambulance in 4 minutes. He was in Flagstaff's emergency room within 12 minutes of landing. The doctors said later that the timing had been almost exactly right. Another 20 minutes in the air and it would have been a different story entirely. He survived. The passengers deplaned slowly. Most of them were confused about the unplanned stop. Some understood eventually what had happened. Some went home and told their families about the long delay in Flagstaff without ever knowing how close the afternoon had come to something that would have ended every conversation they would ever have. Jennifer, in the forward galley, watched Rebecca come out of the cockpit. She had known Rebecca for 2 years. They had worked dozens of flights together. They had shared galley jokes and passenger complaints and the particular exhaustion of long turnaround days. And Jennifer had had absolutely no idea. Not one single idea. Nobody had. Not one passenger. Not one gate agent. Not one crew scheduler who had ever put Rebecca Mason's name on a flight manifest had any idea that they were rostering a pilot to walk the aisles and pour the drinks. Nobody looked. Nobody asked. Nobody thought to wonder whether the woman in the navy blue vest might be something more than what her job title said she was. That was the part that stayed with people afterward, when the story came out. Not the emergency itself. Not even the landing. It was the 4 years. 4 years on the same aircraft. 4 years in the same uniform. 4 years of being completely, absolutely invisible as a pilot, not because she was hiding, but because nobody thought to look. The FAA investigation began 3 days later. They reviewed the cockpit voice recorder. They listened to everything. Every word. Every radio call. Every checklist item. Every moment of the 43 minutes between Captain Brennan's cardiac event and the landing at Flagstaff. They listened to Rebecca's assessment of the situation in the first 30 seconds. They listened to her radio transmissions, professional, precise, exactly what the situation required. They listened to her coaching Emily through the approach, her voice never once suggesting by its tone that the outcome was in any doubt, even in moments when it genuinely had been. They listened to Emily's voice as it steadied. As the shaking in it became something more solid. As a 26-year-old pilot with 4 months of commercial experience found, in the worst 43 minutes of her professional life, that the training was actually there and it actually worked and she was actually capable of what was being asked of her. The investigation report was 47 pages long. The most important part was 1 paragraph. It read, "The successful outcome of this emergency was directly attributable to the assistance provided by Flight Attendant Rebecca Mason, who held valid commercial pilot certificates and type rating experience applicable to the Boeing 737-800, and who provided critical guidance and support to First Officer Hart during an extremely high-stress emergency." First Officer Hart demonstrated exceptional composure in accepting assistance and successfully executing the emergency landing. The coordination between the 2 crew members was exemplary. Exemplary. Rebecca read the word. Set the report down on her kitchen table. Sat with it for a long moment. 8 years of flying. 1,847 hours. A degree from one of the best aviation schools in the country. 5 years of teaching students to fly. An emergency landing that brought 178 people home safely on a Sunday afternoon in March. Exemplary. The story went public 6 days after the landing. It spread the way stories spread when they touch something real underneath the surface drama, not just because of the cinematic quality of a flight attendant walking into a cockpit and saying 5 words that changed everything, but because of what the story was actually about. What it meant when someone is more than what their job title says. What it means when systems fail people who are more than ready. What it means when the most qualified person in the room is the one nobody is looking at. The messages came from everywhere. From flight attendants who held pilot certificates they had never mentioned at work. From aviation students who had given up on careers they had spent years preparing for. From people in every profession who had spent years doing work that did not reflect what they were actually capable of, staying ready for a moment they could not have predicted, waiting for the day when it would matter enough for someone to look past the title and see what was actually there. Southwest Airlines called Rebecca into a meeting at their Dallas headquarters 10 days after the landing. She arrived prepared to defend every decision she had made. Every word. Every action she had taken without official authorization. She was ready for the formal review, ready for the questions, ready for whatever came next. The airline's chief pilot was sitting across the table from her. "We did not know you were a pilot," he said. "I know," Rebecca said. "We should have." She did not say anything to that. She did not know what there was to say. "We would like to offer you a first officer position. On the 737. Starting as soon as you complete transition training, which, given your experience, we expect will move quickly." Rebecca looked at him. "What? You proved you can fly. You proved you can handle emergencies. You proved you have exactly the judgment and skill we want in our cockpits." He leaned forward slightly. "You belong in that cockpit, Ms. Mason. You have always belonged in it. We are sorry it took us this long to see it." Rebecca sat with that for a moment. The student loan payments. The $18 an hour. The 3 rejection letters still in a folder somewhere in the back of her closet. For years of walking the aisles of aircraft she was qualified to fly. For years of renting Cessnas on her days off to stay sharp for a moment she had not known was coming. "Okay," she said. "Just okay." Because that was what the moment called for, and she had never been someone who needed moments to call for more than they actually called for. "Thank you," she said. 6 months later, Rebecca Mason was a first officer for Southwest Airlines. She flew the 737. The same type she had flown into Flagstaff with Emily Hart. The same aircraft she had been serving drinks on for 4 years. The same aircraft she had always known she could fly from the cockpit, through the entire time she had been walking its aisles in a navy blue vest with a coffee stain on the sleeve. She gave one interview. Aviation Weekly magazine. They sent a writer to meet her at Phoenix Sky Harbor between flights. She came into the lobby in her pilot's uniform. Navy epaulets with the first officer stripe. Captain's hat tucked under her arm. She looked completely at home in it. The way people look at home in things they have always been meant to wear. She sat down. She ordered coffee. "I am Rebecca Mason," she said, at the beginning. "I am a first officer for Southwest Airlines. For 4 years before that, I was a flight attendant. Not because I could not fly. Not because I was not qualified. Because airlines decided my background was not what they were looking for. Because the career path I was supposed to take did not have room for me on it, or so I was told. I kept my certificates current anyway. I flew whenever I could. I never stopped being a pilot. I just stopped expecting anyone else to know it." Then Captain Brennan had a heart attack at 31,000 feet. And Emily needed someone. And it did not matter what my uniform said or what job title was on my file. What mattered was what I could do. I was a pilot when they needed a pilot. That is all. The writer asked if she was angry. About the 4 years. About the rejection letters. About the $147,000 in debt that had not gotten her the career it was supposed to. Rebecca thought about it honestly. I was angry for a long time, she said. Then I stopped, because being angry was not changing anything. And I focused on staying ready. Ready for what? I did not know. That was exactly the point. I did not know what I was staying ready for. I just knew that giving up completely, stopping the flights, letting my certificates lapse, deciding that if the airlines would not have me then there was no point, felt like the one thing I absolutely could not do. So I kept going. Stayed sharp. Stayed ready. And it turned out that what I was staying ready for was a Sunday afternoon in March when a man's heart gave out at cruising altitude and a 26-year-old first officer needed someone who knew what it felt like to be scared in a cockpit and had learned that scared and incapable are not the same thing. She paused. I was ready for that, she said. I had always been ready for that. Emily Hart sent Rebecca a handwritten letter a month after the landing. 4 pages. Rebecca kept it in her flight bag. The part she remembered most was near the end. It said, "You told me I had something better than a captain. I did not understand what you meant at the time. I do now. You gave me something I did not know I needed, someone who had been scared in a cockpit and learned that scared did not mean finished. Someone who had learned, the hard way and the slow way, that you are more than the worst moment you are facing. I landed that aircraft. You helped me believe I could. But I landed it. I think that is exactly what you wanted." There is a version of this story that is only about the drama. About the heart attack and the emergency and the flight attendant rushing to the cockpit. That version is easier to tell. It fits better into the shape we expect stories about heroes to have. But that is not what this story is really about. This story is about a woman who spent 8 years becoming exceptionally good at something, and then spent 4 more years doing a different job while staying ready because she refused to let that readiness go. This story is about what it costs to stay ready when nobody is watching. About what it takes to walk up and down an aircraft aisle for 4 years serving coffee on a plane you know you could fly, and keep your certificates current anyway, and show up for the small rental flights on your days off, and not let the rejection letters be the final word about what you are. This story is about the fact that the most qualified person in the room is not always the one in the seat you expect. That uniforms do not tell you what people are actually capable of. That the hero does not always come from the direction you are looking. Sometimes the most qualified pilot in the airspace is serving you coffee. Sometimes the person who saves 178 lives is wearing a coffee stain on her left sleeve. And sometimes, you just have to wait for the moment when who you really are matters more than what anyone has decided to put in your job title. Rebecca Mason waited 8 years for that moment. When it came, at 3:42 p.m. on a Sunday in March at 31,000 feet over eastern Arizona, she was ready. She always had been. If you think job titles define what a person is capable of, if you believe that a uniform tells you everything about who is wearing it, then what happened on Flight 1455 should make you think again. Because the most dangerous pilot in American airspace that Sunday was not sitting in the cockpit at takeoff. She was in the back, loading snack boxes, thinking about her rent. The waitress who took control was not hiding anything. She was right there the whole time. The only thing that changed at 3:42 p.m. was that someone finally needed her badly enough to look past the uniform and see what she had always been underneath it. If that is a story that means something to you, stories about people who are more than what the world has decided to call them, then you already know what to do. Southwest Flight 1455. Phoenix Sky Harbor to Seattle Tacoma International. March 22, 2020. 178 passengers. All survived. Captain Jack Brennan recovered after emergency heart surgery. He retired from flying 6 months later. First Officer Emily Hart continues to fly for Southwest Airlines. She made captain at age 31. Rebecca Mason, First Officer, Southwest Airlines, flies the Boeing 737 out of Phoenix Sky Harbor. She has never spilled coffee during turbulence since that afternoon. She says she has learned to hold on tighter.